You ever scroll through Reddit at like midnight and you come across a post that just hits differently? Not because it's shocking or dramatic, but because it sounds exactly like something you've been thinking but never said out loud. That happened to me recently. I was going down a rabbit hole and I found this thread. A 22-year-old completely broke, embarrassed to even admit it, asking for help. And the thing is, the comments weren't mean. People weren't laughing. They were sharing their own versions of the same story. And I just sat there thinking, okay, we need to talk about this. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're 22 and broke. The advice that exists for people in that situation is almost always written for someone who already has a little bit of a cushion. And when you don't have that cushion, the advice stops making sense. So today, we're reacting to a real Reddit thread, pulling out the actual financial reality behind it and figuring out what the math actually looks like when you're starting from zero. Let me be clear about something before we get into it. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an expert. I'm someone who is figuring this out at the same time as you. This channel is literally me trying to make sense of money stuff in real life, not in theory. So let's do that. All right, so the post. It was simple. A 22-year-old university student said they had no savings, that they were constantly broke, and that they'd been borrowing money from friends just to get by. They described feeling embarrassed. They asked for tips on how to even start saving anything. That's the whole post. And it got a ton of responses. But then there was a second post that I found in the same session, and this one stuck with me even more. A 22-year-old who had been working in food service since they were 17. Since they turned 18, they'd been fully independent. Rent, insurance, doctor bills, all of it. They were halfway through a college degree but had to keep pausing because work came first. 40 hours a week for years, sometimes more. And they wrote that as their friends started moving into higher paying jobs, they felt insecure about having no savings. And then they asked, is this normal or should I be more concerned? That second post is the one I want to focus on today because that person wasn't being irresponsible. They weren't spending money on nonsense. They were working constantly, covering real expenses and still ending up with nothing left. And that's a completely different problem than just not knowing how to budget. So here's my first reaction when I read that post. I felt two things at once. The first thing was relief, like not in a bad way, not relief that someone else is struggling, more like, oh, so this isn't just a me problem. This isn't just poor decision making or a lack of discipline. This is something a lot of people are actually dealing with, and the math behind it is real. The second feeling was frustration, because the comment sections on these posts are always full of advice like track your spending, cut your subscriptions, make a budget. And while none of that advice is wrong exactly, it kind of misses the point when someone is already working 40 hours a week in food service and still can't cover everything. There's a version of financial advice that works when your income is enough to live on, and you just need to organize it better. And then there's a completely different version that has to apply when your income isn't enough to live on in the first place. Most of the advice we see is the first version, but a lot of people, especially people our age, are living in the second situation. Let me break this down in a way that actually makes sense. If you're 22 and working in food service, let's say you're making around $12 to $14 an hour. At 40 hours a week, that's roughly $500 to $560 before taxes. After taxes, maybe you're taking home around $400 to $450 a week, depending on your state or country. That's somewhere around $1,700 to $1,800 a month. Now let's think about what basic survival costs. Rent for even a modest place, maybe sharing with someone else, could easily be $700 to $900 a month just for your portion. Add in groceries, maybe $200 to $300. Transportation, whether that's a car payment, insurance, gas, or even just bus passes, another $100 to $200. Phone bill, utilities, maybe another $100 or more. You do the math and you're already at the ceiling of what you bring in. There is no leftover. There is no savings account getting funded. The money is gone before it even feels like money. And I think this is where a lot of financial advice just completely collapses, because when you Google how to start saving money, the first thing that comes up is the 50-30-20 rule. 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings. Sounds clean, sounds logical. But when your 50% needs are already consuming 90% of your income, the math doesn't work. You can't save 20% of something you don't have left over. Now, I want to say something important here. This isn't an excuse to just give up and do nothing. The person in that second Reddit post post asked a real question: should I be more concerned? And I think the honest answer is not in the way you think. You don't need to feel ashamed, but you do need to understand what's actually happening so you can make a plan that works for your situation, not a plan designed for someone already making $60,000 a year. Here's what I think actually helps when you're starting from zero. And I want to walk through this slowly because I think the order matters. The first thing is accepting that the goal isn't to immediately save a big chunk. The goal is to break the pattern where the balance hits zero every month. Even getting to a point where you have $50 left before the next paycheck lands is a win. That $50 is the beginning of breathing room. It doesn't sound impressive, but psychologically and practically, it changes how you make decisions. When you have $0, every unexpected thing is a crisis. A flat tire, a medical copay, a friend's birthday, anything can throw you into debt or into borrowing from someone. When you have even a small buffer, you have options. And having options changes how you think about money entirely. The second thing, and this is the one I found most interesting from the comment sections on these posts, is figuring out where the invisible spending is, not the subscriptions you can track easily. The invisible stuff, the vending machine 4 times a week, the coffee you grab because you're exhausted. And it's the one small thing you're allowing yourself, the food you buy when you're too tired to cook even though you have groceries. None of these things are luxuries when you're working 40 hours a week in a physically demanding job and you're already stretched thin. They're coping, but they do add up. And the point isn't to feel guilty about them. The point is to see them clearly, because when you can see them, you can make a deliberate choice instead of a default one. The third thing is probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say in this video. At some point, the savings problem becomes an income problem. There's a limit to how much you can optimize spending when the spending is already at its floor. You can only cut so much before you're cutting into things that actually matter, like food quality or getting to work reliably. And that's when the conversation has to shift from how do I spend less to how do I eventually earn more. That might mean finishing the degree. It might mean picking up a skill on the side. It might mean looking for a job in the same field that pays better. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's worth having the thought now, because the people who get out of the food service wage trap aren't usually the ones who just got better at budgeting. They're the ones who created a small opening to move somewhere different. Now, I want to share something personal here, because I said at the start this channel is about real life, not theory. There was a period a couple of years back where I checked my bank account and genuinely couldn't tell you what the number would be before I looked. Not because I was being reckless, because I just knew it was somewhere between not enough and barely enough, and looking too closely felt like it would make it worse somehow. I avoided looking at my bank app for stretches of time, not days, sometimes weeks, and I told myself it was because I was busy or stressed, but if I'm being honest, it was because I didn't want to see the number, because the number felt like it was telling me something about myself, like it was a verdict. And I think that's one of the most underrated parts of being broke when you're young. It's not just the financial stress, it's what the financial stress makes you believe about yourself. It made me feel like I was behind, like I had somehow already failed before I even got started. And reading these Reddit posts, I saw that exact feeling in the writing. The embarrassment, the phrase "I'm doing the best I can" at the end of the second post. That's not someone asking for sympathy. That's someone trying to prove to themselves that they're not lazy, they're not irresponsible, they're not a failure. They're just in a situation where the math doesn't add up yet. The update in the first post, the one where the person said they now had $300 saved, that actually moved me a little. Not because $300 is a lot, it's not, but because that person found a small win and they shared it. And something about that energy is important. That's the right direction. That's what it looks like to start. Not a dramatic transformation, not a viral glow up moment, just $300 more than before and the knowledge that it can be done. Let me talk about what I actually think the realistic steps look like. And I want to be specific here. Step 1, write down your actual monthly income and your actual monthly fixed costs, not what you think they are, what they actually are. Most people, including me for a long time, have a vague idea of this, but not a clear one. Once you see it in actual numbers, you know what you're actually working with. Step 2, find your weakest point in the month. Most people have 1 week or a specific moment where the money runs out or gets close. Understanding when that happens helps you prepare for it instead of just being surprised by it. Step 3, pick one specific number to protect. Not a big goal, something small, $10, 20. The rule is this number doesn't get touched no matter what. You build the habit of protecting that number first before anything else. It sounds too small to matter, but it rewires something in how you relate to your money. You start making decisions that preserve that number instead of decisions that assume it will be replaced. Step 4, look at income before you look at investing. I know investing sounds important, and there's a lot of content online about starting young and compound interest and all of that. But if you're at zero, your first financial goal isn't returns on investment, it's stability. Stability comes from covering your costs and having a buffer. The investing conversation can come later, once there's actually something to invest. Step 5, don't compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 10. This one sounds like a motivational poster, but it has a real financial application. The friend who is moving into a better paying job after college isn't starting from where you started. They might have had parental support for rent during school. They might not have had to work 40 hours a week while studying. The comparison makes you feel like you're failing when really you're just on a different timeline with different constraints. Here's my personal takeaway from all of this. Reading those Reddit posts reminded me that a lot of people my age are dealing with the same thing, but from different angles. Some are in school with nothing saved and feel embarrassed about it. Some are working constantly and still feel like they're running in place. And both of those situations are real. Both of them make sense given the cost of living and the wages available to people in their early 20s right now. What I want to do differently coming out of this is stop treating savings like a destination and start treating it like a practice. It's not a number you reach one day and then you're done. It's a habit of making slightly better decisions over time and building a slightly bigger buffer slowly. The embarrassment and the shame that come with having no savings, that stuff is a distraction from the actual work. And the actual work is just look at the numbers, be honest about what's happening, and take the smallest possible step toward a different pattern. If you've been watching this channel and you're in a similar situation, whether you're starting from zero or close to it, I want you to know that this channel exists for exactly that. We're not here to pretend that someone handed us a trust fund and we just need to pick the right index fund. We're here figuring out what actually works when you don't have a lot to work with, and I think that's a conversation worth having. If any of this resonated with you, consider subscribing. Not for the algorithm or whatever, but because this is an ongoing journey and we're going to keep following it. New video, new thing we figured out, new moment where the plan didn't work, and we had to think about why. That's the channel. So that's where we're landing today. We started with 2 Reddit posts from people our age, working hard, doing everything they're supposed to do, and still ending up with nothing left at the end of the month. And what that showed us is that the problem isn't always discipline or budgeting or knowing the right tips. Sometimes the math is just broken from the start, and admitting that out loud is actually the first real step. If any part of this video felt like something you needed to hear, YouTube has already picked out the next video for you, and it's sitting right there on your screen. Go click it. I'll see you there.